Good evening, everybody. That's right. Mr. Ambassador, in Minnesota, when you say good evening to everybody, the audience responds. I had forgotten about that. I'm only in my sixth year here, so I'm still learning. I'm Eric Schwartz. I'm the Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and it is the delight to welcome Ambassador Schwartz and all of you to this evening's event. The Humphrey School sits in the Cedar Riverside community. And for those of us at the school with responsibilities for the curriculum and related issues, engagement, connection with our community has been a critically important priority for us. And so, and that's reflected in our Policy Fellows program. It's reflected in our Masters of Public Policy program, our MPA program. But as much as we engage with the community outside our door in our effort to ensure that we are not only connected, but that the character of our institution reflects the character of our changing society. As much as we do on that score, we always feel that we need to be doing much more. And so we are absolutely delighted to host this event, to host an event tomorrow night, I think it's tomorrow night, in conjunction with the human rights advocates on issues surrounding Islamophobia. And on October 13th, we will be hosting two ambassadors, the Norwegian ambassador to the United States and the Somali ambassador to the United States, who will be at the Humphrey School to engage members of our community and members of the Somali diaspora. So welcome. And before I introduce Fartun Welly, who will be introducing Ambassador Schwartz, I want to take a moment first so that we can view a video offered by Senator Al Franken, who has also been deeply engaged and committed to issues surrounding not only the development of the Somali-American community here, but also issues relating to Somalia. I also want to acknowledge staff members from both Senator Franken's office, Asman Ahmed, who's right there, and I think a new staff member from Keith Ellison's office, whom I don't think I know, or maybe but if she's here, can she raise her hand? Oh, I thought she was here. I beg your pardon? Okay. So with that, why don't we begin with a video message from Senator Franken, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Al Franken. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today, but I want to thank the Humphrey School and Dean Eric Schwartz for hosting this very important and timely event. And I want to congratulate Stephen Schwartz on his appointment to be our ambassador to Somalia. With the largest Somali-American population in the nation, our state has a special relationship with Somalia and with other East African nations. And since joining the Senate, I've been working closely with our Somali-American constituents on a range of issues like human rights, remittances for loved ones, and making sure that the United States has an ambassador to Somalia. After struggling with violence and instability for over 2 decades, we're finally seeing some steady progress in Somalia. Somalia has been making critical security gains against al-Shabaab, and with the help of the diaspora, Somalis are regaining control of their country. But in order to build on these successes, we need more international engagement. The United States and other international partners must continue to support capacity building and economic development in Somalia. And having our ambassador on the ground in Somalia overseeing those efforts will help get that done. And that's why I am very pleased that after 25 years without an ambassador to Somalia, President Obama nominated and the Senate confirmed Stephen Schwartz earlier this year. So I again want to congratulate Ambassador Schwartz on his appointment. I look forward to partnering with him and all of you to work toward better security, governance, and the economic development of Somalia. Thank you.
So you can report to your boss that his remarks were met with great applause. So it's my pleasure to introduce Fortune Welly, who is the founder and executive director of Issaroon, a nonprofit organization with a mission to help Somali women build self-sufficiency and maintain healthy lives here in Minnesota, in the United States, and in Somalia. I also want to note that Fortune has played an important role in speaking openly about critical issues impacting women in the Somali-American community, the Somali community, and everywhere, reproductive and mental health issues that are so often neglected but are of such considerable importance. So please join me in welcoming Fortune Welly, who will introduce the ambassador.
So the first joke is when I heard Schwartz and Schwartz, I thought they were brothers. And someone said, nope, it's another Schwartz. So thank you so much, Dean Schwartz, for the invitation to be here and a wonderful introduction. Good morning, good evening, and salam alaikum, those who are Somalis and Muslim. I want to thank you, Dean Schwartz, for being awesome ally for Somali community. I know it hasn't been easy for last couple months or couple years about what's happening, but opportunities that our second generation, our first generation get from your university and your relationship is something that we appreciate, and we hope to continue and build relationship. Ambassador Schwartz, again, congratulations on your new point. I know all of us are excited, nervous, and wanted to know what you're going to do about all the both critical work in Somalia, but also opportunities. A lot of people see it, challenges and a struggle, but those both in diaspora and people who are on the ground see many opportunities. So I can't wait to partner with you, with all of us, both here in diaspora and Somalia. I'm here to introduce to you to the audience, and my goodness, you have an amazing bio and long one, so instead of going through all of it, I'm just gonna touch a couple places. So as many of you know, Stephen M. Schwartz was appointed to Somalia's ambassador in June 27 of 2016. Ambassador Schwartz is a member of senior foreign services with rank of counselors. He had been all over Africa, especially in Africa and Europe, in New Zealand, Australia, Pacific Island. He worked also in East Asia and Pacific affairs. Ambassador Schwartz also did a lot of work in Africa, and he was born in New York. That's where I immediately went. I said, where was he born? So he was born in Buffalo, New York. And you will also learn Somali as soon as you know French and Spanish. So we're going to make sure to teach you in Somali. Prior to joining the State Department, Ambassador Schwartz worked in non-governmental organizations in supporting transitional to East European and the former Soviet Union, and in the Africa program of booking institution. It's my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Schwartz.
Thank you, Fortune, and thank you, Dean Schwartz, for inviting me here and for hosting this great event. I think it is the largest number of people I've spoken to about Somalia, and I'm really excited to have such an audience, so thank you very much. I was confirmed by the Senate a little over, well, about 3 months ago now, and I've been out at my post of assignment for over 2 months, working between Nairobi in Kenya, where we have our main office, but increasingly in Somalia. So I've been in Mogadishu now 4 times, and when I go back next week, I'll be in Nairobi 1 day, and then I go up to Mogadishu for 4 or 5 more days. So increasingly, we're moving activities to Mogadishu, and I will be moving there, I think, permanently, probably in about a year or so. But what I want to say about Somalia, I'll talk a bit about what the U.S. government's done over the last years in terms of diplomatic relations. I'll talk a longer bit about how I see Somalia today and where it needs to go, and then some points about what the U.S. government's doing on the ground in Somalia to help them get there. So, but I think to start off, I think the story about Somalia is a positive one today. I think over the last decade, they've made real progress, and we no longer say that Somalia is a failed state, but that it's a fragile, recovering state with a lot of promise. The one thing I would add, though, is that the gains that it's made, while real, are reversible, and it's going to take a lot more work and a lot of Somali leadership to get where Somalia wants to go. So, in 2009, the United States appointed a special envoy for Somalia, and we had 2 of them for a total of 6 years. And the first sort of was done in parallel with the establishment of a transitional government for Somalia. And then in 2013, after the transitional government had become a permanent government with new leadership, the U.S. recognized the Somali government for the first time in over 20 years. Secretary Kerry became the first Secretary of State ever to visit Somalia in 2015, and then I was nominated as ambassador to Somalia in January of this year and confirmed by the Senate in June. I'm the first U.S. ambassador to Somalia in 25 years, and it's really quite an honor and a privilege to have this role and this responsibility. And as to get at what Fartun said, I see nothing but opportunity in Somalia, both for Somalia and for the United States with Somalia. And that's what I'm all about, trying to identify and exploit and make real. So since my arrival in July, the U.S. has established for the first time in 25 years a continuous diplomatic presence. For a number of years, we would have some diplomats or development workers go into Mogadishu for brief periods of time. It might be 1 or 2 people for 1 or 2 days. And that in the course of a month, most days we probably had no officials there. Now, that's never the case. We always have some people on the ground, both State Department, USAID, doing development work, or defense attaché or some other military people. But it's usually members of the U.S. mission that are there, and the Somalis are beginning to grow accustomed to us being there, and it's really advantageous to be on the ground. So before going any further, I want to note the huge contribution to Somalia of the diaspora community from around the world, but in my role from the United States. It's really, I think, surprising to see just how prominent the diaspora is in Somalia. Over half of the president's cabinet are diaspora. Over half of the members of the lower house of parliament are diaspora. A lot of senior advisors to ministers and the like are diaspora. We did a signing of an education agreement about a month ago. It was the first cooperative agreement that Somalia has signed with any partner in about 30 years. And the 3 Somali ministers that were there were Australian, British, and American. But what's interesting about it is that the diaspora that I've seen, and I've met many, they come back for a long period of time. They're not coming back because it looks good on the resume. They're not coming back so they can brag back home. They're coming and staying. They're staying for years, and they're sort of reintegrating with a whole new level of skills, and worldview, and connections, and it's really tremendous. And as many of you know, also on the private sector side, the economic investment, commercial investment is really tremendous. People say that there's whole parts of Mogadishu, for example, that have been reborn in terms of people building homes, opening shops, and things like that. And it's really a tremendous contribution. And Somalia has benefited a lot, and the people have, by and large, accepted it, which is tremendous. Because I've been in some countries which have suffered from long periods of conflict, civil strife, and sometimes diaspora want to come back later, and then they're not welcome. They're seen as, well, you weren't here at that time, and you can't relate, and we don't need you. These jobs are ours now. But I think to the credit of the Somalis, they're not taking that approach, and I think it's working quite well. In trying to understand Somalia and where it is today and how it got there, there's a lot of, I was distracted a bit at first. A lot of people focus on Al-Shabaab as the problem, or maybe the weak leader or a political system or something. But I've concluded that the problem in Somalia, the challenge in Somalia, and what has brought it to where it is a crisis of governance. A crisis of governance that's lasted a good 30 years, beginning with the Siad Barre regime, and then going through the Civil War and years without government, and now with fledgling institutions. But it's a society that's marked with some deep divisions. But I think 30 years without any good governance has left the country with a lot of challenges. Logically, one would talk about, the impact on economic growth, or on education, or health outcomes. But I think the duration and the depth of the strife in Somalia has made the challenges even more severe, particularly severe. Somalia suffered, I think, mostly through the Civil War, clan segregation. So Mogadishu, which used to be a very cosmopolitan, large, thriving metropolis, basically was torn apart. And Somalis who were not from a subclan indigenous to Mogadishu basically left. And it's left the city today primarily one clan or 2 subclans, and others left. And there hasn't been, and I can talk about this later, but there hasn't been, and not just with people from Mogadishu, but Kismayo and elsewhere, there has not been in Somalia any formal, or as far as I'm aware, even informal reconciliation, as has been done in many, many countries that have had deep civil conflict. But in addition to clan segregation, it's also given rise to extremist ideologies and a terrorist insurgency, and profound corruption. All of these are serious challenges. But I think most damaging of all is a breakdown of social trust. And without social trust, it's really hard to make any progress at all as a society. And reconciliation processes can help restore that. Normal, secure life can restore that over time. But it's going to be slow, and it's fundamental to what Somalia is going to need going forward. So I've identified about 4 broad areas that I think Somalia will need to make progress on if it's going to sort of become the stable, prosperous, democratic state that I think most Somalis want it to become. And in looking at them, I said, well, there's pretty much nothing that's not on the list. So, but maybe grouping it into 4 makes me look smart or something. But the 4 are security and justice, state formation and reconciliation, public financial management, and social and economic development. And I'll start with security and justice, because without security and justice, nothing else can happen. It's the first responsibility of any government is to provide security. If you look at the preamble to the US Constitution, it lays out sort of 6 roles of government. 3 of them have to do with security and justice. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense. I mean, it's fundamental to what needs to happen. And in Somalia's case, they don't have it. They don't have a functioning army. They don't have a functioning police force. They don't have a good correction system. And they don't have a robust civil court system. We're doing some things to help. Other partners are doing some things to help. But it can't happen without Somali leadership. And right now there are 22,000 African troops providing security in Somalia. Their goal really was to provide space for these fledgling institutions to take root, and they've really done that. They've also cleared al-Shabaab out of the urban areas, which they don't control al-Shabaab doesn't control them anymore, although they do perpetrate some terrorist acts from time to time. So AMISOM, it's called, the African force, comprised of troops from Uganda, Burundi, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And under African Union auspices, they've announced that beginning in 2018, they're going to start to withdraw. And President Museveni, Uganda, has been clear that he's only going to keep his troops there until 2018 if Somalia develops an army that can start working and fighting with his on the ground against Shabaab. Uganda's had troops there for 9 years, and Museveni wants to see Somalia take over, and so do we. State formation and reconciliation. Using the US Constitution analogy, this would be the form a more perfect union phrase. Arguably, Somalia's most notable achievement over the past 4 years was the establishment of federal states in the southern part of the country, namely Jubaland, Southwest, and Galmudug administrations, in addition to the pre-existing northern administrations of Somaliland and Puntland. Before, or hopefully after, the current electoral process, the regions of Hiran and Middle Shabelle need to come together and form the last federal state. And similarly, under this rubric, you might also have formal discussions between Hargeisa, the capital of Somaliland, and Mogadishu, the federal government, about their relationship going forward and to come up with some legal and constitutional basis for that. Somalia needs to conclude a long-deferred process of drafting and approving a permanent constitution. Actually, they were supposed to do it in the last 4 years, and I think it's worked out well for them that they didn't, because the development of these federal states has been profound. It's really important now in Somalia that these states are beginning to assume a real role governing regions, populations, beginning to try to provide services in between a very weak federal government in Mogadishu and people on the ground. And so I think over the next 4 years, when they do this, the negotiations will center largely on what are the various roles and responsibilities of the federal government and the regional governments and even district governments. And that will wind up being a more effective and a more durable constitution for Somalia. Public financial management. I mean, this is what allows government to promote the general welfare. And I think it's something that some people overlook, but it's really what makes government function. How can it function? I mean, today in Somalia, unfortunately, for example, very few, if any, public servants, military officers, even intelligence officers are getting paid. They're not getting their salaries. for example, because the government isn't able to raise taxes. It gets money from the airport, gets some money from donors, and that's about it. It's going to need to be able to raise taxes from business, from people, and to do that, it's going to need a legal basis, it's going to need more capacity, it's going to need coercive power and police and courts. But businesses, the public, is going to need to believe that the money they're providing might do some good, that it's not going to get stolen as soon as it's collected, and that it's going to get spent in some legal way that decided by government officials or a legislature for a public good, whether that's a road or salaries for civil servants or a contract to improve a port or what have you. But that just has to happen. In addition, they're going to need to come up with revenue sharing agreements between the federal government and the regional governments. And this would cover just regular tax revenue, but also one hopes in the future substantial amounts of money that the government can raise from fisheries, from oil and gas, and some other natural resources that Somalia has but aren't yet exploited. And lastly, social and economic infrastructure. And this is really, with the first three in place, enables the government institutions to secure the blessings of liberty. I mean, this is where you're spending money to improve health outcomes, to improve education systems, to foster job creation, to resettle refugees and other migrants, to build the nation's physical infrastructure, and many other things that government will be called on to do. Right now, too little of this is happening on the part of Somali authorities. Donors, charity groups are doing some things, not enough, but much more leadership has to come from Somali authorities, both at the federal level and at the regional level. The U.S. has a complex bilateral assistance program focused on building durable foundations for long-term security, democracy, and prosperity while meeting urgent humanitarian needs. Until recently, key security partners trained Somali troops to their own standards with little regard for what became of the forces after training was finished. One estimate that I heard was that in the last decade, foreign governments have trained as many as 80,000 Somali troops. And I think that we would be hard-pressed today to identify 5,000 of them that are actually working for the Somali government or for any recognized institution. A huge waste of money, maybe even counterproductive, because if you're training people to fight and use weapons and you don't know what becomes of them, it's reckless and irresponsible. And we are now trying to end that, and we have formed, the key security partners have formed a Security 6, or an S6 group, with the United Nations, the European Union, us, the UK, United Arab Emirates, and Turkey. And we've had several meetings and, amazingly enough, agreed so far. A lot of these partners do not agree, haven't agreed in the past, but right now we are. And the central problem has been that all of us have tried to some extent to get the federal government to create a Somali national army, to take over from Amisom, to fight Shabaab, to protect the Somali people. And for whatever reason, it hasn't happened. It hasn't even come close to happening. So what we agreed to do in July was to shift the responsibility from the government in Mogadishu to the set of governments that Somalia has set up. Because one thing that's a really healthy development has been the emergence of a national leadership forum in Somalia. Some of you might have heard of it. And it's a group of 8, but it's the 5 regional presidents, the national president, prime minister, and speaker. So these 8 men have, over the last year, made all the hard decisions that have been made in Somalia, mostly related to the electoral process, setting up a national police service, and a few other things. So what we've done is to present to the National Leadership Forum the challenge or the opportunity of defining what the Somali National Army can be. Somalia has plenty of people who can fight and who have guns, but most of them are not in a Somali National Army. Most of them are not accountable to the federal government, to civilians in many cases. There's no standard of training or performance, no systematic rank system. So it needs to happen. The regional presidents really control or have great influence over a lot of these forces, and I think what we're hoping for is that collectively they can decide what forces will constitute the Somali National Army. We and the other S6 partners will be ready to build that army for them to an appropriate standard pretty quickly and look forward to that opportunity. We have on our own created the Danab Battalion, which I think most people in Somalia would call the most effective part of the Somali National Army. But it's one battalion and it was a big investment, and we can't do that sufficiently to create a whole army. But it's a very useful and effective force. On the police side, we've created 2 units, a criminal investigative division, a joint investigative task force, which have proven themselves already in about 18 months to be very effective, so much so that Shabab's targeted them. But after the Dalo airline bombing, some of you might have heard of this guy had a bomb and a laptop, which fortunately killed only him. It was these police units that did the investigation, the evidence collection, and put together, working with the prosecutors, a successful case. And a number of people were convicted in civil court of this conspiracy for terrorism and are in jail. And that's a real victory, I think, for government and for justice in Somalia. I would also note that the Minneapolis Police Department has played a big role, and we've had a number of exchanges with Somalia. We had Somali-American police officers from Minneapolis come, and I think the transit chief, Harrington, has come several times. And it's really tremendous. The Somalis love it. It's really useful for them. And it's something that we're encouraging with more police departments around the United States. The second big area would be in sort of democracy and the electoral process. And right now, Somalia is in the midst of an electoral process. We're not calling it an election because 99% of Somalis don't have a voice in it. 4 years ago, 135 clan elders picked 275 members of the lower house who then voted for president. Now, it's a bit more representative because the 135 clan leaders are picking 14,000 people who will vote for the 275, who will then vote for the president. That process is going slowly. They've just extended the time, I think for good reasons, for technical reasons, to make the process more thorough. We've been pushing hard, we and some of the other key governments, Sweden, UK, European Union, and the United Nations in particular, to try to keep political leaders out of deciding how the election should be run. That's been a challenge. Sometimes they do have to make decisions about it. We've looked to the National Leadership Forum, which is sort of broadly constituted to do that, as opposed to just the president who's a candidate or just the prime minister who's a candidate. And we're going to look for a couple things in particular to see how that goes and draw our own conclusions. And one is that we push them to really stand up an independent electoral dispute resolution mechanism. It's one of the few ways we've identified that people in the process who have grievances, candidates or otherwise, can bring that to some neutral arbiters and get a hearing in a timely way and a judgment maybe in their favor, maybe not, but at least on some sound basis, and this would be done in a transparent way. Otherwise it's really hard for the Somali public to have many means to see how this has gone. Is this a credible process or not? How would they know? The other one is that Somalis have committed to having 30% of their parliament be women, which is tremendous. It's twice what the percentages are now. I think it's higher than ours. And we've pushed all along that they try to respect that 30%. And there's many people in the process that would like to not do that. But so far, they continually have committed to doing it. And that'll be, I think, quite tremendous if they do and provide for a more representative political system. But all this is sort of a stepping stone to 2020, when Somalia is supposed to have one person, one vote elections. And that, I think, can be a game changer in Somalia. It removes clan leaders from determining key parts of the process. It empowers a lot of marginalized groups, and it may even attract more people who want to legislate, want to lead, want to govern than is currently the case. But Somalia doesn't have the electoral institutions to pull off an election like that. And it's going to take a lot of work throughout the country to identify who are the voters and to train people in how to run an election as complicated as a national election would be. But we've launched through USAID a 5-year program to help them build that capacity. The UN and the United Kingdom have complementary programs. We, all over the world, particularly with the British, have worked very well in electoral systems. The last 2 countries I've worked on, Nigeria and Zambia, we were actually partnered our funding and our programs with the British. And I think that in Somalia, the US and British working together is always very effective. And then the last area would be humanitarian assistance and development. And Somalia's humanitarian crisis is spurred by recurrent drought, al-Shabaab-induced insecurity, and a fragile national economy has left Somalia with a chronically high level of food insecurity among its population. There was a recent announcement by the UN and the US together that estimated 5 million, that's about 40% of the whole population of Somalia, are suffering from food insecurity. And 1 million of those are at the emergency or crisis levels and need food aid to survive. It's a very serious problem. The US has been the largest provider of humanitarian assistance in Somalia, and we expect to continue to be. We're also helping with Somali refugees in the region. Largest number, of course, being in Kenya in the Dadaab camp. Kenya has asked that refugees be returned to Somalia. That is complicated, as all of you would know. The situation in Somalia is not terribly secure, and there's not a lot of infrastructure for refugees to benefit from in returning. And in fact, many, I think, find that there are more support systems in the camp in terms of education or healthcare than might be available to them resettling in Somalia. But there are pretty substantial assistance packages to them. Larger numbers than ever before are returning. But our negotiations with the Kenyans and Somalis and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees are focusing on voluntary repatriation in conditions of security and dignity. We would not support at all any sort of forced expulsion of refugees. The situation wouldn't hold. But Somalia's future success also depends on improving the lives of the Somali people and spurring economic growth. Our stabilization programs support community-led post-conflict reconstruction programming and quick impact projects that promote improved service delivery, facilitate economic growth, and provide tangible benefits of civilian government, particularly in areas vacated by al-Shabaab or where al-Shabaab has been pushed out. And there's USAID is running 2 programs, which one of them allows communities to identify, they both allow communities to identify needs, and those needs are met. One program is within 3 months, and the other is within a year. And the kinds of needs that they come up with are usually classrooms, government buildings, police stations, a market, sometimes cultural events in areas where music or dancing or things were prohibited. They want to restart some of that. And these are, we do it through, mostly through the International Organization of Migration. There's actually it's all our money, but we're not visible. We're not trying to attract attention from Shabab or anything. What we're trying to do is to help these communities move forward after a period of deprivation, and to show that the civilian leaders there can be responsible for progress, and to, in a sense, give them some confidence to attempt more on their own on behalf of the community. And the last one I'll mention is GALE, which is camel in Somali, but it's growth, enterprise, employment, and livelihoods. And this is sort of attracting $74 million of investment over the next 4 years in a range of different sectors, most agriculture and livestock related. It aims to create 5,000 jobs. It's run by a really tremendous officer and team at USAID. And every Somali I've talked to, sort of in government or in business, raves about it. They really see a lot of promise there. But these and other programs enable the U.S. to help Somalia move forward during this critical period of its incremental but tenuous recovery. Some address immediate, urgent needs. Others build Somali capacity to address its own longer-term needs. With strong, capable Somali leadership, the country will get there. I'm delighted to lead the United States effort, to partner with Somalia, and to have had this opportunity to describe today's circumstances and future prospects to you. Thank you, and I look forward to
I think what we're going to do now is we'll have a conversation with the ambassador. I've got, Fortune, why don't you just sit right there? And I've got about an hour's worth of really excellent questions. I mean, I get we do a lot of these events, and I often get questions that I don't quite know what to do with because they're not all that coherent. These are not in that category. So we're going to try to get through as many of them as we possibly can. And so I'm going to, and if we, if you have to leave at 8:15, you should leave at 8:15, but we may stay around a little bit close at 8:30. I'm not looking at any of my staff because I'm afraid they're scowling at me now. In any event, I'm going to invite Fortune to ask the first question, and then I think I'm not going to ask any. I want to go right to these, and then we may have some follow-up on the questions, but we're really going to stick to these cards. Fortune?
Thank you. So you talked about a lot about Somalia's issues. I'll get to the point. Somali women and their families, girls, infants, they're in big trouble. All these things that are happening, last data that showed the infant mortality rate and the maternal mortality rate, the economic disparity of Somali women and Somali girls. As you're thinking about all these economic development, institutional development, what are the strategies in really pinpointing that Somali women not only get the 30% of political participation, which actually Somalis, either the clan or the people in the political process are actually preventing that to happen. What are the intentions or the strategies for U.S. government and your office to make sure that not only Somali women have voices and participation in the political arena, but also what are we doing to make sure that we reduce these infant and maternal mortality rate, girls' education, and women's economic development?
Thank you, Fortune. I agree with you. It's a very serious set of issues, and I mean, we are doing some things now. We have some USAID education programs which are aimed at girls' education, primarily literacy, primary enrollment of both nomadic communities and non-nomadic communities. I've spoken to senior levels of USAID about maternal and child health program. USAID, there is an initiative in this area. It's pretty robust at USAID. The indicators would show that in all of these areas, maternal health and infant health, that Somalia is near the top or the bottom of every list. So I think a strong case can be made. I got a good hearing, and I'm hopeful. Earlier this week, I was in Seattle, and on Monday, I think, and I met with the Gates Foundation, and we talked about health programming. They're not currently looking at Somalia in a big way, but I raised its profile with them, told them to look through this electoral cycle, and let's see what happens. Let's see what kind of leadership Somalia gets out of this electoral cycle, and if there's a partner that something can be done with. But I agree with you. We are giving it attention on our side. We will raise these issues with the new government once it's in place. Yeah.
I'm going to go to the cards now, and I'll just say, after I've gone through 3 or 4 of these cards, Fortuna, I may turn to you and see whether these cards have generated any follow-up questions that you might have. But I really, these are, and you will see that these questions, they don't mince words either, which is very welcome and a characteristic of a community that often calls things as they see them. So this is a 3-part question. First, as ambassador, could you please tell us what your plans are about not being drawn into clan wars in Somalia? That's question 1. Question 2, what will be U.S. plans to address the failure of intelligence sources which resulted in the death of over 20 Somalis who were members of the Somali security forces who were stationed in Galmudug region? I think that's good enough, those 2 questions.
Well, to the second one about the unfortunate death, I'd heard it was 14, but maybe it's 20, up in Galmudug. To be honest, I just have bits of information on that and can't address it except to say that it's obviously terribly regrettable, but I don't know the circumstances behind it yet. I'm sorry. Yeah, about the clans. So before I went out to Somalia, the Bureau in the State Department that does analysis, they do this for outgoing ambassadors. They bring in outside experts, and so they brought in actually 5 of them, but there were 3 quite prominent people talking about different aspects of Somalia. And it really struck me that they concluded, all with some vigor and emphasis, that I and the U.S. government and other donors need to focus much more on these regional governments that I mentioned, these federal states, because the Mogadishu government, they had sort of 2 big reasons, well, 3. One is that the regional states are actually closer to the people and they're starting to do things, and we need to be there. But the federal government, they said, is, 1, not terribly competent. It's going to be a long time before it has the ability to administer the country, to sort of project influence, power, legal or otherwise, across the country. But in getting to the clan issue, and this is sort of gets to this clan segregation I mentioned earlier, it's seen as being dominated by one clan, a clan that's most populous in Mogadishu, and the president's clan. And so they said that the more we focus on partnering with the federal government, the more we're seen as favoring one clan over all the others. So it is one of the reasons why we are trying to work more at the regional level, and those regions would reflect the variety and the spectrum of clans and subclans in the country. It's also important that, for example, embassy staff be of different clans and not all predominantly one clan or one subclan or something, because the message that sends to Somalis is that we're favoring X or Y. You know, and a lot of Americans, I mean, we don't know what one's clan is. I mean, the whole clan construct in Somalia is, I think to an outsider, it's a bit confounding, because by and large, Somalis, they're the same, and yet there's an identity constructed that is sort of all important. But there's not an obvious difference. So you really need to be into the Somali, I think, culture and society to be able to want to focus on it, because it's not anything that I think we as outsiders see, but we have to be sensitive to at all times. So.
I want to change, I want to move domestically for one question, and it's actually a question which is really not in your area of responsibility, but I think I would be remiss. It's a question that emerges from these cards, and I think I would be remiss, and I think legitimately subject to criticism if I didn't ask this question, which is that within the Somali community here, I think it's safe to say that there is a broad consensus that there should be efforts to support the community from the government in giving young people a sense of hope, a sense of ownership in a positive future. There is I don't think there's any dispute about that. But the federal program, with the support of the Department of Homeland Security, there are differing views within the community about that. Those who have been very supportive recognize it as an effort to build resilience within the community, to address issues of extremism, and take the position, I think, that where the support comes, it should be welcomed. Those who have been more skeptical or in opposition have questioned why that support comes from a federal law enforcement agency that has responsibility for enforcing criminal law, and why so much of the frame has been articulated in the negative, countering violent extremism rather than the positive. And it's an issue on which people of good faith within the community, with the best of intentions, have differing perspectives. And I'm confident that they would like to hear from you about your perspective on that issue. I hope I've captured this, but I mean, I've listened to members of the community on this for many, many, many months.
Wow. I can see the problem. I haven't heard of this before. I mean, this is part of why I'm here, is to get a better sense of what the diaspora community is thinking and how they fit in, what they're thinking about Somalia, what we can do for them. But this is sort of new to me. I mean, I've thought for a long time that, I mean, the U.S. government tends to be, I think, reactive. I think, internationally, in fact, somebody asked me, in Somalia, they were asking about sort of development programs, or how do you get attention or something, and I said, well, look, the U.S. government seems to react quickly to two things, and one is humanitarian crisis, and the other is terrorism. And we've got funding lined up for those things. And it's often hard to find, the funding to do the maternal and child health program, or to do the good thing that needs doing, because even if everybody knows it's a good thing, the money gets taken by the more urgent issues somehow. But I'll learn more about this and get smarter. Yeah.
I'm going to ask another question, but Fortune, I'm going to invite you to comment and ask a question about the issue I just raised, because I feel inadequate as not a member of the community to articulate, and I hope I did the issue justice. So let me ask a much more straightforward, not easy question, but straightforward question. Do you believe that Kenya has a hidden interest to not change the status quo? Also Ethiopia. Somalia has a long coast. Well, I'm reading the question. Homogeneous society, oil, fisheries. It is a potential power if it ever rises in the region. It might become a regional power. I mean, this question really is, what are the intentions of Kenya, Ethiopia, and the neighbors, and how, and I think I will, and beyond that, what's the U.S. approach toward the powerful neighbors?
I mean, I have to say first off that I have no idea what Kenya or Ethiopia's deep goals are for Somalia. But I don't have any reason to believe today that either country wants to see Somalia weak and fractured. I mean, the Somalia over the last 30 years has, it's been a burden on the region. I mean, Kenya in particular, I mean, Kenya's got hundreds of thousands of refugees, which it's now treating as a political or a terrorist problem, whether it is or not is something else. So both countries have troops in Somalia, in border regions, as part of AMISOM, and fighting Shabab. Both countries are so. Actually, when I left Somalia about 10 days ago, they were about a week away from supposedly launching a military offensive against Shabab, which may now need to be put off till after the rains. But they're, I think, pretty serious about trying to help Somalia fight Shabab. And I honestly think that a strong, productive Somalia, whose people are living in Somalia, not neighboring countries, a country that is not needing African peacemakers, 22,000 of them, to protect it. I think it's a good for the region. I mean, I really think that they would welcome a strong, stable, peaceful Somalia. You know, in the past, certainly Ethiopia and Somalia had a rivalry. Somalia invaded Ethiopia in the late 70s. I want to believe that isn't going to happen again in the future. It's certainly not going to happen in the near future. Somalia doesn't have an army. So I think that the future is a strong Somalia partnering with Kenya and Ethiopia, both of which are much, much larger in terms of population. I mean, Ethiopia is like 9 times the population. Kenya is maybe 5 times the population. And they're more developed and more stable. So I don't think Somalia poses any threat to them. In fact, I think if it poses any threat, it's from instability and Shabab and things like that. So fixing those things fixes the region.
Thank you. Fortune, do you want to weigh in with a question or a comment? If I'm not forcing you to.
No, it's okay. I think if we flip the other side of Ethiopia and Kenya, also have benefited the instability of Somalia. Diaspora sends money to the refugee camps. People who had developed businesses both in Kenya and Ethiopia. So I can see where the concern is. Being Somalia stable, does that mean all the dollars will go back to Somalia and other things? So I'm just being a devil's advocate and looking not only strategically but economically. Somalia being a mess, it's also, it gives both the power and economic money that as a diaspora we send money to Kenya, our communities. I want to stop that, but I want to get to the corruption that Somalia ranks one of the top corruption or corrupted. countries, and we have new cabinet members, we have everybody who might not know that next year or next 6 months they're going to hold that position. The government doesn't have money to give. One of the research that we did in early 2013 when we were trying to partner with Minister of Health, that many of the millennial Somalis who both came from Europe and United States have really had strong feelings that the larger NGOs that are coming from US and Europeans had strong hands on the corruption that's happening in Somalia. And because these, the leaders and the Somalis who are on the ground have to develop relationship with the NGOs and who have well-meaning intention, but they also have to do the work. Then they will also pay some money to get the work done. So while we're trying to prevent corruption, what is USA going to do to have the NGOs also being transparent, so both areas are built and there's a transparency and also accountability to both groups, so we can prevent or at least stop some of the corruption that's going on?
Thank you. No, I hadn't heard this before in terms of the U.S. NGOs being involved in that.
Not only U.S. NGOs, all the NGOs.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'll certainly look into that when I'm back. I believe USAID does have pretty rigorous sort of monitoring and evaluation and financial accountability systems in place, which doesn't mean that things don't happen with implementing partners. But I'll certainly look into that when I'm there. I mean, one of the things, you know, the story I've heard 20 times or more about Somalia and sort of corruption, and I actually said this to the president. So there's, you know, the story. So if you're, you know, Somali and you're driving down a road and it's controlled by Al-Shabaab, so you pay a tax, you pay a toll at some point. They give you a receipt. You show the receipt all the way down the road and you don't have to pay again. If it's a road not controlled by Shabaab, the odds are you're going to pay a toll 20 times because Somali soldiers, police aren't paid. They don't get salaries. So how are they going to get any money? So they go to the road, they're each like a kilometer apart or whatever, and they just tax every vehicle that comes. You know, what I said. You know, I talked about how governance is sort of the critical thing, and I said to the president, I said, look, I mean, people may not like Shabaab where it is, but they know that there's some predictability to taxation, to justice, to security in those areas. Like it or not, they know what to expect. In the areas controlled by government, there's none of that. It's more random. And I said, until government can operate as well as Shabaab or better, why would the public support you and not them? So if you really want to win the hearts and minds, you're going to have to perform better. So it's just a corruption anecdote. Sorry. But then I say pay your people anyway.
Yeah.
This is a question which really goes to the issue of, you know, relations with federal states, and it's so. But I'm just going to read it verbatim.
Sure.
Since Somaliland declared its independence from Somalia in 1991, it has been held 3 elections and conducted free and fair elections with peacefully, without getting recognition and assistance from the international community like the USA. Are you planning to give recognition, and would you think about the USA sending a diplomatic mission to Hargeisa and open an embassy to support the democratization process? I think I know the answer to that question, but I think the question raises a broader issue, which is, how to deal with, situations where there's very different levels of capacity, and how will you, as the ambassador, engage that process?
Very carefully. So, no, we're not going to.
I have to interrupt. He's 1,200 miles from Washington, but he's not. So he's very careful.
What was I going to say? I mean, the future relationship between Somaliland and Somalia needs to be decided solely by the Somalis themselves. And we encourage them to have those conversations. There are supposed to be some talks sort of convened by the Turks. I'm not sure that they're making any progress or that they're really meeting very often. But they're going to need to sort it out among themselves. We are not taking sides. We're not going to recognize Somaliland. We can certainly commend them for the good governance that they have demonstrated in terms of paying civil servants and paying their soldiers and having democratic elections. But we also do help them. We do have assistance programs there, including for elections. I mean, we're sort of not, discriminating against them for their status. We're just not taking a position on their assertion of independence.
Thank you, Ambassador Schwartz. The Somali-American pin you are wearing means a lot to us. And so the question is, what makes the next 4 years, what will make the next 4 years better than the failure of the last 4 years? And actually, that's an interesting question. What is different, or what has the real capacity to be different?
I think a number of the things that I mentioned today. So in the next 4 years, Somalia has to develop an effective army and police force, because AMISOM will not be there in these numbers 4 years from now. Number one, it will complete state formation. Haran Middle Shabelle somehow will reach agreement, and they will start to develop as a regional administration. There will be a new constitution, which I think will be huge in laying out the roles and responsibilities, and then from that, developing some of those key processes that I mentioned, like public financial systems and the like. I see all of that happening in the next 4 years, and I think those are huge, fundamental pieces of the future Somalia, and from there, growing and growing.
So I'm going to ask two more questions. I'm going to ask the first one, and Fortune, I'm going to give you the final question. Okay? So, but my question, the penultimate question, is, what if you could identify? Well, let me. How would you finish this sentence? I went to Minnesota. I met with members of the diaspora community. What a vibrant, engaged, interesting community this is. If there were 2 or 3 additional measures, things that this community could do to support the development process in their country of origins, I would love it if they. How would you end that? How would you finish that sentence? How do you think members of this community could be even more helpful in terms of the development process in Somalia?
So, and I don't know if these exist, but I was in Seattle earlier in the week, and this came up in a conversation, and I suggested it to them, and they seemed to like the idea. But that the diaspora communities across clans create assistance organizations, I don't even want to call it, development group, charity, NGO, that invests in Somalia, but that is clan blind. I mean, I think that is powerful for Somalia, where the principal criterion in any allocation of something would be what is somebody's sub-clan or clan or who got it last time. But doing things, funding projects just on merit, with some sort of geographic diversity or whatever. Because the question I got in Seattle was, it was sort of that the U.S. government should help sort of like literally each community fund its own programs back in the country. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. How is that helping Somalia, really? That's sort of just, that's deepening the divisions. Somalia could set up a sort of a Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. Where those exist, and there are many around the world, the U.S. government can provide assistance to those ministries, and those ministries can, encourage, accelerate, and channel some diaspora contributions of different kinds, human resources, money, things like that. Hopefully, it's transparent and there's some accountability for the resources and things. But I would say coming together across clan to contribute to Somalia on a merit-based sort of project basis would be a strong signal back in Somalia.
Martina, do you have a final question?
Yep. And so you've listed critical key issues about Somalia's to do in order to get off the ground and create opportunities for infrastructure building and sustainability. I know you're doing listening sessions and listening to the diaspora community, but in the end, as you're looking at everything else, what are your top, if we were to say right now, tell us what are your top 3, 4, or 1 of all the topics that you've listed, what is it? I know all of them has to be done, but if we were saying you have 2 years to do, what is it? What are your top priorities out of these?
I mean, one is indirect, and it is over the next couple of years overseeing what I hope will be a shift in the U.S. presence from a Kenya-based presence to a Somalia-based presence. And I think that will be a huge force multiplier to everything we're trying to do in Somalia. So, I mean, that's certainly, number one. Number 2, I think, would be helping them create an army. Because as I said in the beginning, without security, nothing else can really go forward. And while ultimately Shabab won't be defeated militarily, it'll be defeated by more inclusive government, better governance, and fewer grievances. I mean, most of its support comes from communities with grievances against neighbors, against authorities, sort of up the chain. And so it's an act of rebellion, really. So I think helping build an army. And then I'd like to say helping push the democratic process. Part of it is the immediate challenge of the electoral process, but what I mentioned before about building those institutions for 2020, because I think ultimately if Somalia can have a free and fair election, one person, one vote in 2020, I think it's a transformative event, and I think building the foundations for that now are critical, because it won't happen. I mean, one of the reasons it was supposed to happen in 2016, and they're utterly nowhere close, and they're barely able to pull off this greatly reduced electoral process of 14,000 people, let alone whatever it would be, 6 million, 7 million. So I would say those areas, I mean, a huge area that needs to be addressed in Somalia is youth. 70% of the population is under 30. Maximum 10% of them have gone to secondary school. What's their future? It's not one that the U.S. has an answer to. We've got some programs here and there, but it is a big, big issue for Somalia.
Well, if you knock off those 4 issues in your first 6 months, you'll be in great shape. Before we thank Ambassador Schwartz, I just want to say that, you know, when I was in the State Department and visited Minnesota and other states in my role as the head of the refugee program, it was extremely unusual to leave Washington. You can leave Washington if you're a diplomat, but you normally would have to leave the country. You don't travel west from Washington, or if you do, you know, you're flying to Los Angeles to catch the flight somewhere to East Asia. But increasingly, you know, given the increasing diversity of our society, what Ambassador Schwartz is doing today is really critical, and I think, but still a little unusual in the Department of State. I think it's really important, and I really want to express our deep appreciation for your visit. I hope it's the first of many. And I would ask that you join me in thanking Ambassador Schwartz for tonight's presentation. And thanks also to Fartoon Wali. Thank you, Fartoon. And please join us tomorrow night. We've got an event with human rights advocates on Islamophobia. And then on October 13th, we've got a couple more ambassadors. They just keep coming. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Eric.
That was terrific.